So it's lesson 6, part 2. We've started implementing authentication. So we've done a really simple basic auth example where we've used authorize at our controller level. And then we've used allow anonymous at the individual method level. And then in our layout, we just added a little bit of logic around our categories link, so only an authenticated user would be able to see it. So we've kind of performed this first level of authentication. So in this case, the only distinctions that we're making are somebody who's anonymous and somebody who's logged into the site. So that's our first level. Now, on top of that, we want to implement authorization. So to do this, we're going to need to do a little bit of work. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create 2 roles in the database. We're going to create an administrator role and a customer role. And then we want to take this first user account that we've already created with the login admin.gc.ca. We want to make this user, we want to put them in the administrator role. So I've got a quick script here on Blackboard in the week 6 folder. If you scroll down to this item, it says SQL for users and roles. So I want you to copy these 3 insert statements. So copy those to your clipboard. I'll put them in the chat as well. So the first line creates a role called administrator with an ID of 1. The second creates a customer role with an ID of 2. And the third statement is going to select our existing user account and make that person put them into the administrator role. So I'm going to go to, you'll need to connect to your database in Management Studio. And you can simply click on the New Query button here. You can also get here just by right-clicking your database and New Query. The New Query option is in the context menu as well. And just make sure you've got a little drop down here of your databases. Make sure you pick Global Grub as your database. And then you should just be able to paste these 3 commands in. And to run them, you can just click the Execute button on the toolbar. So this will create 2 records in ASP.NET roles, 1 record in ASP.NET user roles. So let's go ahead and click Execute. Tells me things completed successfully. So now if I go and look, for example, if I query the ASP.NET roles table, I've now got 2 roles here, an administrator and a customer. So we're going to make a little change to our web project now. We only need 1 administrator account. So we've manually created this account with this insert statement. This takes the existing 1 record in our ASP.NET users table and puts that user into role ID 1. So they're an administrator. We're not going to create any other administrators, but what we want to do is change the code on our register page. So whenever somebody else registers, we are automatically going to make them put them in the customer role. So we'll have to customize the code in the user registration. So how do we do this? This process is a little bit different. You'll notice if we go and look at the project inside of views, we don't actually see the register view. It's not here. It's not even in the shared section. Pardon me. So if we want to modify the register, something in the code behind the scenes when a user registers, where do we actually find this? It's in this folder we haven't really worked with before under areas. You expand to areas, we've got an identity area, and then we've got pages. So the register page is here, we just don't actually see it. So I'm going to right-click my identity folder, and I'm going to choose Add a New Scaffolded Item. And that brings up this window. So we were going to pick an, I'm going to click on Identity. So we're scaffolding a new identity item, and I'll click Add. And it's asking, are we using one of the existing templates or a new one? So the page we want is the account/register. So that's down here in the third column, the second last item. We have to pick the data context class, which will be our application DB context. Yes, I will show it again. So under areas and identity, you're going to right click and choose Add a New Scaffolded Item. Over here on the left, you're going to click on Identity, second item from the bottom, and then we'll click Identity in the middle. There's only one choice, and then click Add. This is going to give us a list of all of the page templates available for user identity. I'm going to click on Register, and my application DB context, and I'm going to click Add. So this is going to allow us to modify both the UI. We're going to leave the UI. We're not actually going to change the view, but it'll actually give us access to the C# code that gets executed by the register page, because we are going to make a change in the C#. Alex, that is odd. Just thinking. Okay, that's good. So now in my Solution Explorer, under Identity Pages, I've now got an account subfolder. And here we can see, here's the register.cshtml. So this is the view. We're going to leave this code alone. We don't need to change anything in the view. But if I expand my register.cshtml, there's another file underneath it called register.cshtml.cs. So I'm going to open up this. This is all the C# code that runs on the page. Yep, so to get here, you'll right-click identity, you choose Add New Scaffolded Item, you choose Identity on the left, and click Add. And then you choose Account Register and your application DB context. That'll do it. So we're going to scroll down here to line right here. So here's our method that runs when the user submits the form. Okay. It checks if the inputs are valid. So for example, did they follow the password rules? Did they provide an email address format as their username? And then what happens if the model is valid? We're creating a new user with their email. We use this user manager class, which will hash their password. And this returns a result object. And if our results is successful, so if we successfully created the new user account, what happens here? It logs some information. It might send a confirmation email if we've turned that on. Otherwise, it just signs them in. So we're not doing this. So our code skips all of this and comes down here, right? It signs them in automatically and takes them back to the main page. So before we do this, we're going to add a little bit of code that says if the user creation is successful, we want to then add this user into the customer role. So we're going to add any new users automatically to the role of customer. So I'll create another variable. I'll call this result1. And it's going to be similar up here. This is creating a new user. This time we're going to use the user manager dot add to role async. We're going to add the new user to the role of customer, and customer is a string. So this will create a new record. New record in ASP.NET user roles. So only that first account we created as the administrator will be in the administrator role. Every time we sign up with any other account, that new user is going to be assigned to the customer role. Okay, any questions about, so here's our new line, I've highlighted it. Any questions about what we're doing here? Now, we have to configure one more thing in order for this to work. We already looked at it, but we're going to implement it now. If we go back to our startup file, which again, you can find right here down at the bottom of the project, we made one change here already. We can see on line 35, got this little green mark. So we already toggled true to false for the sign-in confirmation. By default, our project is already set to manage user identities. We already know this works because we can log in and we could control access, restrict access to authenticated users. We now need to add here, we need to enable role management. So I'm going to chain on here dot add roles with identity role. So role management is not enabled by default. This is not on by default. So if we want our project to not only, here we're tracking users, but we've also got to tell it to track the roles. So we're going to add that into this add default identity method. So now we can try this out. We're going to go and register a customer account, and then we can look in the database. And if it works properly, we should see that we get a new user, and that new user is also in the role of customer. So we'll test it out and see. So I think what I'll do, I'm going to stay logged in here as an administrator in Firefox. Now I'm going to go to Chrome, and I'm going to register. And again, let's use the same logins. So our customer email will be customer@gc.ca. We'll just use the same password, test123 $. So I'll put these in the chat. So I'm going to try to create my second account, but this user should be in the role of customer. So I'll go and register. So it's logged me in, right? It brings my categories link, makes it available to me now because I'm logged in. So I'm going to go and check my database. Let's see what's here. So first, if I check the users table, right now I've got a second user with a unique user ID. And if I check ASP.NET user roles, now I've got two records here. So my first user is role ID 1, that's our administrator. My second user is now a customer. So we assigned this role manually with the SQL script I put on Blackboard. But from now on, anybody else who registers on the site is automatically going to be assigned role ID of 2, which is a customer. So identity gives us the infrastructure for our roles, but it doesn't offer any particular role definitions. We will define what those roles are depending on the site that we're building. So for our purposes, the two roles we used were administrator and customer. But for another type of project, we might want different roles like student, teacher, support staff, whatever it is, like Blackboard. So now I want to change the authentication rules we added in the first part of class. Because right now, as a customer, I can create new categories in the store, for example. Well, I shouldn't be able to do this. So we're going to need to make a couple of changes. Now you still have only one user in ASP.NET users. Did you complete the register form as the customer and submit? And does it show that you're logged in as the customer? Okay, so now if that's the case, one of two things happened. You may have missed or not saved the change. So in startup, we've got to add the roles. You won't get an error without this line, but it won't save any roles without it. So you need this add roles line in startup. And in the register cshtml.cs, you'll need this line. We're not actually using result one, Alex. So we could just call it without this. As long as we call that method, it should work. Second operation. Okay, so if you click it, yeah, try it again. I would recommend trying again to register. I will put my code up again. So enable rules, make all new users customers. Okay, let's have a look at that link from Microsoft. We may need this. You can try it with an await. That might, yeah, we need await. Yeah, I should put that in my notes. I have it in my notes. I missed it. That's why. My apologies. So it's a threading issue with asynchronous code. I missed the await. Thank you. Thanks, Attila. Yeah, you found it. So I missed await here. So we should have that. So now we've got two user accounts. I'm going to go back to the categories controller, scroll up to the top. So now we're going to make a change here. Instead of, yes, that's right, Scott. Instead of allowing any authenticated user to access the categories, we're going to set roles equal to administrator. And this has to match the role name in the database exactly. And I believe it's case sensitive as well. We'll try it without. So by adding this role attribute, this now means the administrator account should be able to get to the categories, but the customer account should not. So we're not just doing an authentication check. This is now a role-based access control. So add this code in blue to the authorized statement and try it again. So as the administrator, I can get here. As the customer, right, I get access denied. So I am logged in, but I don't have access. So it doesn't take me to the login screen. I've already verified my identity, but this identity doesn't have the proper permissions. So we get access denied. Okay, Attila, excellent question. If you want to add more than one role, you just It's just comma separated. So super administrator, product manager. Let's say we had a product manager role, for example. You just specify with a comma. Now, let's check if it's actually case sensitive. Yep, Alex, we're going to do that. I'm glad you raised that because that's exactly what we're going to do. What happens? Let's see if it's case sensitive. Right. So in my database, if I check the ASP.NET roles table, right, it's administrator with a capital A. So if I make it lowercase, access is denied. So those role names are case sensitive. If the database has a capital A and my code names it with lowercase, it doesn't work. So if I put that back to a capital, now with my admin login, I can get here. It's the normal name. Okay, Yulia, you are saying your access is denied for both. So are you logged in as an administrator? It shows. Okay, try logging out and then logging back in. And make sure you have the add roles method defined in startup. If you don't have this, it can't track user roles. Okay, so you just need it to log out and log back in. So yeah, if it's not working, log out of the site as an administrator and then log back in. So now, Alex, yeah, we're going to change the authentication, the check here, because right now in our layout, right, all we're checking is if the user is logged in, but we're not actually checking what kind of user they are. So instead of using .isAuthenticated in the layout file, we're going to check user.isInRole administrator. So now in Firefox, my administrator account should have the categories link. In Chrome, my customer account should not. In Firefox, I'm all good. But in Chrome, I no longer see the link. It's gone. So controlling access is fairly simple. Let's also go and secure access to our products controller. So as a customer, again, these pages right now, we're using them for managing the products in our store. So a customer should not have this access. So how would we do that? Very simply. What change should we make to the site? So that only the administrators can manage the products. Yeah, we're going to scope it to the admin role. So where would we go to do that? We just need to make one small change. Yeah, I think we want to do it at the controller level. That's right, Shisato. In the controller, Yulia, let's add an authorize roles equals administrator to the products controller. So we'll go to our controllers, go to products. Here's our class definition on line 15. So we're going to add the same restriction so only administrators have access to anything in the controller. I just accept the reference to Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authorization. So now customers should no longer be able to access the product management part of the website. Are they going to need to be able to see products so that they can shop? Yes, absolutely, but we'll deal with that a bit later. So it's the same reference and same authorization rules in both the products and categories controller. It's identical. And now, as a customer, I get access denied to the products, but as the administrator, I've got access. Now, the administrator is missing one other thing, right? Alex, I'm surprised you haven't mentioned it yet. We need to give the administrators a way to get to the product. Right now, to get here, I actually had to type the URL. By all means, yeah, thanks, Scott. Make those suggestions. Scott did throw it in. I apologize. Yes, it should be bothering you. So in our layout, we want a products link also inside this if statement, right? Only administrators should be able to see the products link. So I'll just copy that list item, and I'm going to change the controller to products. And I'll change the heading, the text on the link to also say products. So now administrators get both categories and products. Anonymous users or customers, they don't see either of those links. So now in Firefox, as an administrator, I can get to wherever I need. As a customer, I don't see either of those. So we've largely built most of the admin panel, right? As the store owners, we can create categories, we can manage the inventory, we can upload photos along with the products, but we have to use that administrator account to do it. And this is typical. Oftentimes, most web applications that we build, we typically build the admin area first for the site owner to manage, and then we typically build the public face of the website second. So we can start to do that. We're not going to do a lot more today. I think we'll wrap up, have kind of an early day. I know you guys worked hard on your assignments. You've got a midterm next week, so I don't want to overload you today. But what we can do is we can start to build just a small part of the public website, the actual shopping section. So now we're coming to, you mentioned, well, how do customers see it? We're actually going to build a separate controller. So we don't have to do it that way, but I'm going to kind of separate out the logic. The categories and products controllers, those are largely for the administrator. And then we'll be able to shop controller that's largely for our customers in public. So I'm going to go back to Solution Explorer. we'll right-click our controllers. Let's add a controller. This one is going to be an empty controller. So we're going to define all of the methods and views because they don't neatly fit with the create, list, update, delete model. Right? For shopping, we're going to define what this looks like. Yeah, we're just going to create it and define our own methods and views, Manjinder. So pick an empty controller. And we will call this one shop controller. So just make an empty controller called shop controller. So this way, the URL will be like our site / shop, like domain / shop. So on the index view, which we'll create, I'll just go back here in Chrome. So I want the URL to be /shop. And on this page, we're going to show our customers a list of categories. But instead of using this kind of HTML table, this scaffold, we're going to use like Bootstrap card view. So it's going to look a little better. And then when they click on a category, then we can take them to a list of products in that category. So first thing we need to do is we need to build the view. So the easy way, right-click index, add view. We'll just pick an empty view. We'll just build this manually. So pick Razor View Empty. The name is going to be index because our method name is index. So let's click add. We get this empty page. So if I save this, we can maybe just put even an H1 tag on here. Shop our store. So I've just got an H1 here for now. Oops. Use Chrome. So if I go to the shop page right now and refresh, right, it shows our new view. So we just need to do 2 more things with this, and then I think we're going to stop for today. What do we need to do here so that our page can show the shoppers the list of categories? Yep, we'll need a model in the view. Yep. Yeah, Yulia, and where will the query go? Yulia and Scott, to get the list of categories, where will we write that code? Yeah, in the controller, in our index method, we're going to fetch, right, Attila, we're going to fetch the list of categories, pass them to the view. And then as Alex said, we're going to add a model to our view, and then we can use a loop to display them. So we'll go back to the shop controller. We want to use our category DB set to fetch a list of categories to display to shoppers. Okay, so a couple small changes in here. Let's see. Now our controller is empty, so the one thing we're missing here is we don't have a database connection. So we're going to need to change this. We're going to need to add DB context to use a database. So So we can use most of the code from one of the other controllers. Yeah, that's right. Because I wanted the URL manager, this isn't based on a specific table. That's why. Orders and products are mapped to the order and products tables, but I want the URL to be this, localhost/shop, because it's a descriptive URL. It's not based on a specific table exactly. So we need an instance of a database object with a constructor. So we're going to add that. So this will be private, read only. Now it doesn't recognize our application DB context. So if we reference the data namespace, we then get an instance. Oops. So then we're going to set up our constructor. So we're going to take a database connection object in and assign it to our class level. So assign incoming DB connection. So we can use it in any method in this controller. No, we don't need to at this point, Nat, because somebody could shop anonymously. They can't check out anonymously, but they could browse the store and put items in their cart. We're not going to make them register and log in to do that. So if somebody wants to shop without being logged in, we'll allow that. The checkout method, so most of this controller will be public, but our checkout and payment methods, those will require users to be in the customer role. Yes. So now we can use this context and we'll want to order our categories alphabetically. And I'm going to convert that query result to a list. And then we want to pass that list to our view. Okay, so we need a database connection object. We need a constructor that uses our database connection, which we assign to a class level variable. And then we can use that class level variable to query the database. So we are writing a query. We are not using any SQL. We don't need to, because our DB set will automatically query the database. It writes the SQL for us underneath the hood. So now we should be able to just modify the HTML in the view. We're going to declare a model, an IEnumerable of type category, and then we can use a loop to display the categories in a card view. And then we're going to stop for today. So just 5 more minutes and we should be finished. Are there any questions about the controller code that's here? So let's go back to our index view. I'll take out what's up at the top. And we'll add a couple lines of server-side code. We're going to declare a model that's IEnumerable of type global grub dot models oops. So our model is an IEnumerable. It's a list of categories. We'll also set our page title. I think we had to do this way. And now we can use a loop to iterate through the categories and display them, but we're not going to use an HTML table. We'll use card view for this. I'll put them in a card group container, and then we can use a for each loop. So for each category, which I'll call C in the model, I may have to adjust the classes a bit. Generally, we want rows of cards, so 3 cards at a time. We'll use the card body class. And let's just print out here the name of each category. I don't exactly know how this is going to look. We'll try it out. May have to adjust it. Oh, okay, that looks decent. Right, rows of 3. And the last thing we'll do, we'll just make these links. Yeah. So then I'm going to wrap this c.name in an anchor tag. So I'll do an anchor tag, our ASP controller. It's going to be shop. Our ASP action. I think I'll call the action shop by category. So we'll create that method next week. We can pass in as the ID here. I'll just wrap it so we can view it all. Oops, and that would be c.category ID. So each link is going to call shop by category. We'll do this next week. We'll create this method. Sorry, not next week. We'll do it a bit in week 9. It's going to call a new method. It's going to pass in the ID. So we're basically making those category names links. If I click on one, the ASP root defines a parameter. So notice it gives me category ID equals with a number. So it's okay, this method doesn't exist. So when we resume with this in lesson 9, we'll make it so that once I click on dairy, I then get a card view of all the dairy products. I can click on a product for details or add to my cart. Is what we'll want to do with this. So this is good enough for now. So this is a public view, and I can be even an anonymous user. Right? I'm logged in as a customer, but I don't have to be logged in at all. I can be anonymous. I could still get here. So here's the controller. Sorry, I'm going to do one last thing. This is, I promise, the final thing we're going to do. I'm going to change the link in the nav bar that says home exactly now. You're brilliant. You read my mind. We don't even, instead of adding the link, we can just change the link that says home, because we actually have 2 links to the home page already. Right? We just go back. Our logo is a link to the home page. We don't need a link that says home as well. So let's just change this to say shop. And that can call our shop controller instead. Don't worry if you're a bit behind. This is all going to go on GitHub in just a moment. So in our layout, on line 30, we've got the home link that calls the home controller. Well, we've already got a link to the home controller index action, our logo. So I'm going to change line 30 so the controller is now going to be shop. And the link will say shop. So anonymous users now get 2 links, the logo that goes to the home page, the shop link that takes them to the shopping area. Administrators will also get the product and category links. So now I'm anonymous, I can shop. I'm a customer, I can shop. I'm an administrator, I can manage categories, I can manage products, or I could still go into the shop. Oh yes, I will have to clean up the logo. It's true. Okay, I'm going to push everything to GitHub. So we've secured products, area, start, shop control. Okay, all the code is up on GitHub. Sure, Shisato, like, what did you have in mind, Shisato, for the product table? Sorry, when you click, oh, right. Yeah, I think we did. Somebody proposed, so under products and index. Yeah, we just need to add this class equals sort table no sort here as well. That should fix it. So we already had it above the images. We can add it to our last column. I think that will fix it. Yeah. Thanks for the reminder. So I will push that change. Okay, folks, it's 1:02. So all the code is up for today. I would like to stop now because what we're going to do in our first class after reading week is we're going to work on this piece. We're going to work on integrating Google and Microsoft logins. And that's going to take us a little while to do. It's not, I don't want to start it, get halfway through and then resume it in 3 weeks. I would rather do that piece in it, that part of the lesson as one complete lesson. So everything's up on GitHub. Yes. So Scott, I'll come to your question. So that's all we're going to do for today. So the only thing you have to do for next week is to prepare for the exam. Now you can add Google Maps, but yeah, don't make any more changes to your project now because it's past the due date. So I want to be able to mark them as they are. Okay, so that is certainly something you can work on adding additional functionality after I've marked it. No problem. But don't do anything else with it. Yeah, if you did something, don't push those changes to GitHub because then you're committing after this. So please hold off on that. Once I've marked it, you're free to do more stuff with it. All right, folks. So that is it for today. I think we're gonna wrap up early today. All the code you need is on GitHub. Okay, good point. We will talk about Azure more because I know it's becoming an issue. Jesse, is that so? What you want to do is you should be able to change the service plan. If you go in, you should be able to click on vCore and downgrade it to the basic plan.